The Grand Hall of the Consortium was the most important place in the galaxy. It was a place where rulers, diplomats, and warriors from hundreds of alien civilizations gathered to decide the future of the stars. It was a place of power, of great speeches and secret deals. And today, for the first time, humanity had a seat at the table. Captain Elias Carter stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by beings of all shapes and sizes. Some were tall and thin, their bodies glowing with energy. Others had hard shells like insects or scales like reptiles. They all had one thing in common. They were older, richer, and far more powerful than Earth. At the top of the room, seated on golden thrones, were the heirs of 4 of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. These were the 4 imperial princesses, each the future ruler of a mighty alien race. Their eyes, bright with intelligence and arrogance, looked down at Elias like he was a joke. "Is this the best Earth has to offer?" One of them sneered. She was tall, her silver skin shining under the great lights. Her name was Princess Velrana of the Xalith Dominion, and her people controlled entire star clusters. A simple soldier dressed in old-fashioned armor. No psychic powers, no genetic enhancements. How pathetic. The other princesses laughed. Elias kept his face calm. He had expected this. Humanity was new to the stars. The other races had been traveling space for thousands of years, while Earth had barely left its solar system. These rulers saw him as weak, as nothing. Princess Kaelira of the Zindar Empire leaned forward. She had dark red scales and golden eyes that glowed like burning embers. "Your people are small, Carter. Weak. You barely survived your first contact with the galaxy. If not for the laws of the Consortium, we would have claimed Earth as another colony." Princess Silani of the Ithari Confederacy, a being of soft blue light, nodded. "Humans rely too much on machines. You cannot fight with your minds or your bodies. Your species is slow and fragile. Even a child of my race could control one of your best soldiers with a thought." The last of the princesses, Princess Yugasa of the Olaris Syndicate, smiled. She was pale with violet hair, her sharp features full of amusement. "You have no great fleets, no royal bloodlines, no real place among us. Earth is a backwater planet filled with short-lived creatures who think they matter." The laughter spread through the hall. Elias felt hundreds of alien eyes watching him, judging him. They expected him to be angry, to shout, to fight back with empty words. But Elias was a soldier, not a fool. He knew what people like these respected: power, strategy, and most of all, victory. So, instead of arguing, he smiled. "If we are so weak," Elias said, his voice steady, "why are you wasting your time mocking me?" The laughter stopped. The princesses blinked. Elias stepped forward, his posture firm. "You say we are fragile, slow, unimportant, and yet you speak about us. You notice us. You fear us." He looked at each princess, meeting their gaze without flinching. "If humans were truly nothing, you wouldn't need to insult us. You wouldn't need to prove anything." Princess Velrana narrowed her eyes. "Fear you? That is ridiculous." "Is it?" Elias tilted his head. "Then prove it." The hall grew silent. The rulers of the galaxy were watching, waiting to see where this conversation would go. Elias continued, his voice steady. "There is a game known throughout the Consortium. An ancient game of tactics, of strategy, of the mind. A game played by kings and emperors. Celestial Gambit." Whispers filled the hall. Celestial Gambit was no simple game. It was a test of intelligence, patience, and adaptability. Wars had been decided by it. Dynasties had risen and fallen because of it. Elias smiled. "If humans are so weak, then I challenge all 4 of you to a match." The princesses exchanged glances. For a moment, they seemed surprised. Then, amusement returned to their faces. "You wish to challenge us?" Princess Kaelira laughed, her sharp teeth showing. "Each of us has trained in Celestial Gambit since childhood. No human has ever beaten a master of the game." Elias shrugged. Then you should have nothing to worry about. Princess Yvessa smirked. And what do you offer if you lose? Elias didn't hesitate. If I lose, humanity will leave the consortium's High Council. We will step back from galactic politics for the next 50 years. You will not have to listen to us again. The room gasped. This was a serious gamble. The princesses whispered among themselves. To remove humanity from power without war, without effort, it was too good to ignore. Princess Velrana's eyes gleamed. And if you win? Elias met her gaze. If I win, you will swear an oath of loyalty. Not to Earth, not to humanity, to me. The hall erupted into chaos. Rulers shouted, aliens gasped. The princess's guards stepped forward, ready to strike down the human for his arrogance. The princesses stared at him, their faces unreadable. For a moment, it seemed they would refuse. Then, Princess Velrana smirked. You amuse me, Captain Carter, she said. Fine, we accept your challenge. But do not cry when you lose. Elias gave a slow nod. We'll see. As the deal was sealed, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. A human had just wagered the future of his entire species against 4 of the most powerful heirs in the universe, and he had done so with nothing but a smile. The news spread like wildfire. Across the consortium, from the core worlds to the farthest colonies, people talked about one thing. A human had challenged the 4 imperial princesses to Celestial Gambit. No one could believe it. Celestial Gambit was not just a game. It was an ancient test of strategy, played for centuries by the greatest minds in the galaxy. Kings and emperors had settled disputes with it. Great wars had been avoided, or started, because of it. To challenge one master of the game was already foolish, but 4. At the same time, that was madness, and yet Captain Elias Carter had done exactly that. Now he sat in a massive chamber, the Hall of Judgment, where the match would take place. The room was grand, built from glowing stone, with thousands of alien spectators watching from high seats. Some were rulers, others were warriors, scholars, and spies. Everyone wanted to see this moment, the humiliation of humanity. At the center of the room was the gambit table. It was not a simple board, but a 3-dimensional holographic battlefield, where players controlled armies, built empires, and outwitted their enemies through strategy and deception. The game was played in 5 rounds, each more complex than the last. The 4 princesses took their seats across from Elias, their expressions amused but confident. Princess Velrana, the silver-skinned ruler of the Xalith Dominion, leaned back in her chair. I almost feel guilty, she said, her voice smooth like silk. You truly believe you can win against all 4 of us. Princess Kalira, the scaled warrior of the Zindar Empire, smirked. You will last maybe 2 rounds before you break. Princess Solani, the glowing Ithari diplomat, shook her head. This is not war, human. It is intelligence, patience, and calculation. Are you sure you do not wish to surrender now? Princess Yvessa, the violet-haired ruler of the Ulleris Syndicate, twirled a silver ring on her finger. A part of me admires your foolishness, she said. It is almost entertaining. Elias remained calm. He did not let their words shake him. Instead, he met their gazes one by one and smiled. Shall we begin? A deep voice echoed through the chamber. It belonged to High Chancellor Orvos, an ancient being with 6 golden eyes. He raised a ceremonial staff. The challenge has been made. The wager has been accepted. His voice boomed across the hall. Captain Elias Carter of Earth, you will face the 4 imperial princesses in Celestial Gambit. If you lose, humanity will be cast from the High Council of the Consortium. If you win, the princesses will swear an oath of loyalty to you. Silence filled the chamber. Then the High Chancellor struck his staff against the floor. The game began. The first round was about expansion. The players started with small territories and had to grow their empires, manage resources, and prepare defenses. It was the easiest round, designed to test basic understanding. As expected, the princesses moved with precision. They knew exactly how to position their forces, where to build, and when to strike. Their moves were flawless, calculated with the experience of years. Elias, however, played differently. Instead of focusing on immediate growth, he built unexpected alliances with the game's neutral factions. He avoided early fights and positioned his forces in ways that seemed weak, but were actually traps. By the end of the first round, the princesses noticed something strange. Elias had survived. Not only that, but he was in a stronger position than expected. Princess Velrana raised an eyebrow. Interesting. The second round introduced politics. Now the players had to deal with diplomacy, trade, and secret betrayals. Princess Solani, the master of negotiations, dominated this round. She manipulated game characters, brokered false alliances, and controlled the flow of resources. The other princesses moved carefully, avoiding traps. Elias, he played unpredictably. Instead of forming alliances with the expected factions, he turned enemies into friends. He gave away small advantages to gain bigger ones later. He spread false information through the game's eye-controlled advisors, making the princesses second-guess their own strategies. By the time the second round ended, Elias had caused two of the princesses to make critical mistakes. Their armies were still strong, but their economies were now weak. Princess Uvessa narrowed her eyes. Clever. The third round was war. Now, the game board became a battlefield. Fleets clashed, cities burned, armies marched. Princess Kalira grinned, her sharp teeth showing. This was her specialty. No one could defeat her in battle. Her fleets moved like a storm, crushing everything in their path. The other princesses played carefully, avoiding heavy losses. Elias, he played like a human. He did not fight fair. He used deception, guerrilla tactics, unexpected retreats, and psychological warfare. He let the princesses think they had won battles, only to trap them in situations where their victories cost too much. By the time the third round ended, Elias had weakened all four of them. Princess Kalira's smile was gone. The fourth round was chaos. This round was unpredictable. Random disasters hit the board. Plagues, rebellions, asteroid strikes. The game tested how well players adapted to sudden change. This was where Elias truly excelled. Humans were masters of adaptation. While the princesses tried to hold their original plans together, Elias embraced the chaos. He adjusted, shifted tactics, and turned disasters into opportunities. By the end of the fourth round, the scoreboard showed something shocking. Elias Carter was in the lead. The hall of spectators erupted into murmurs. No human had ever come this far. The princesses were silent. The final round was about survival. The board was now a dying galaxy. Empires crumbled. Resources were scarce. Only the most cunning player would endure. Elias looked at the princesses. For the first time, he saw something new in their eyes. Not arrogance. Not amusement. Concern. He smiled. Shall we finish this? And with that, the final battle for the future of humanity began. The final round of Celestial Gambit had begun. The massive holographic board flickered in the center of the Hall of Judgment, displaying a crumbling galaxy. Once great empires lay in ruin, resources were scarce, and alliances were breaking apart. It was now a battle of survival. Elias Carter sat at his place, calm but focused. Across from him, the four imperial princesses had lost their earlier amusement. What had started as an entertaining game had now become something much more serious. Princess Velrana, the silver-skinned hair of the Xalith Dominion, leaned forward. Her golden eyes studied the board, searching for a weakness. "You've lasted longer than I expected, Captain Carter," she admitted. "But this is where your luck ends." Elias gave a small smile. Luck had nothing to do with it. Princess Kalira, the war strategist of the Zindar Empire, frowned. "You play like a ghost," she muttered. You don't attack directly, you don't defend normally, and you make moves that shouldn't work, yet they do. Princess Solani, the glowing diplomat of the Etheri Confederacy, exhaled slowly. It's frustrating, she admitted. Your strategies don't follow the standard logic of the game. Princess Ivessa, the cunning leader of the Alaris Syndicate, tapped her fingers on the table. You're making us uncomfortable, Captain Carter, she said, her violet eyes narrowing. And I don't like being uncomfortable. Elias said nothing. He simply watched as the final round continued. The last moves begin. In this round, only one player could survive. The galaxy was collapsing, fleets were starving, and planets were on the edge of rebellion. The princesses played cautiously, saving their strength for the last battles. Elias did the opposite. He burned everything. He abandoned planets that seemed valuable but secretly drained them of all resources first. He sacrificed fleets to lure enemy forces into unwinnable battles. He gave away territory, knowing the other players would waste their strength fighting over it. The princesses watched in disbelief as Elias collapsed parts of his own empire, something no rational player would do. What is he doing? Whispered Princess Solani. Princess Kalira's eyes widened. He's controlling the collapse. He's choosing what falls apart and what stays strong. Elias smiled. She was starting to understand. While the princesses were fighting to preserve their empires, Elias was reshaping his into something stronger. A dangerous trap. Halfway through the round, Princess Velrana saw her chance. Elias' empire looked weak, barely holding together. If she struck now, she could destroy him. She moved her fleets in, launching a massive attack. Elias, however, did not defend. Instead, he retreated. Again. Laughter erupted in the hall. The spectators thought he was running away. Coward, Princess Velrana whispered. But then, her fleet entered the territory Elias had just abandoned, and the trap closed. The moment her forces landed, riots broke out. Secret insurgents, planted by Elias in the previous round, rose up, targeting key command centers. Velrana's forces had no supply lines, no safe retreat. Elias had let her take the planet, but he had turned it into a death trap. Velrana's forces crumbled. The laughter in the hall stopped. One by one, they fall. Seeing Velrana's mistake, Princess Kalira launched her own attack, aiming to crush Elias before he could recover. But Elias had predicted this. He allowed her to advance deep into his remaining empire, then suddenly cut off all her retreat routes. She was surrounded. Kalira gritted her teeth. You never fight a human the way you fight others. Elias interrupted calmly. We don't play fair. Kalira's forces surrendered. She was out. Only 3 players remained. Princess Solani was next. She had avoided direct battles, playing a careful diplomatic game. But Elias had spent the previous round planting misinformation, spreading rumors that she was planning to betray her allies. Now, as the final moments of the game arrived, her trade partners turned on her. Her empire collapsed without a fight. She stared at the board in shock. I never saw it coming, she whispered. Now, only Elias and Princess Ivessa remained. The final battle. Ivessa was not like the others. She was the most cunning, the most unpredictable. She had not underestimated Elias. She had studied him. As the last 2 empires stood, she smiled. You are good, Captain Carter, she said softly. Very good. Elias nodded. So are you. For the first time, she looked at him with respect. Then the final battle began. It was a brutal game of deception. Ivessa moved carefully, setting up traps. Elias countered with his own. Fleets clashed. Territories changed hands, but neither player could gain the upper hand. Then, Elias did something unexpected. He surrendered a key system. The audience gasped. Had he made a mistake? Ivessa took the bait. She moved her forces in, only to find that Elias had already positioned his fleet behind her, blocking her escape. It was over. Elias had won. The Hall of Judgment fell silent. The impossible had happened. A human had beaten 4 of the greatest minds in the galaxy at their own game. The princesses stared at the board, unable to speak. They had mocked him. They had laughed at humanity. Now they were bound by their own wager. They had lost. Elias Carter stood up, his voice calm but firm. "According to the terms of our wager, you will swear loyalty. Not to Earth, not to humanity." He looked at them. To me. The silence was deafening. Then, one by one, the princesses lowered their heads in submission. In that moment, Elias Carter was no longer just a representative of Earth. He was the most powerful man in the galaxy. The Hall of Judgment was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Elias Carter had done the impossible. He had beaten 4 imperial princesses at Celestial Gambit, a game that decided the fate of civilizations. He had turned their own strategies against them, forced them into mistakes, and outplayed them at every step. And now, as per the wager they had agreed to, they were bound to him. Not to humanity. Not to Earth. To him. He looked across the table. The princesses, once amused, arrogant, untouchable, now sat in stunned silence. Princess Velrana, the silver-skinned ruler of the Xalith Dominion, had her hands clenched into fists. Her golden eyes burned with frustration, but she said nothing. She had lost fairly. She knew it. Princess Kalira, the war strategist of the Zindar Empire, had a blank expression, her sharp reptilian features unreadable. But Elias could see it in her eyes. Respect. Princess Solani, the glowing diplomat of the Etheri Confederacy, sighed, shaking her head. "This is madness," she murmured. "A human controlling us. The consortium will not accept this." Princess Yvessa, the cunning hair of the Ulrus Syndicate, gave a small smile. "Oh, but they will." She turned her violet eyes toward Elias. "A deal is a deal. We cannot break our word, not without losing our honor." Elias remained calm, his hands resting on the table. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply waited. Finally, the High Chancellor, the ancient ruler of the consortium, rose from his throne at the far end of the hall. His 6 golden eyes studied Elias, then the princesses. "The wager was accepted," he said in a deep, echoing voice. "The terms are binding." His gaze settled on the princesses. "You know what must be done." A heavy silence followed. Then, one by one, the princesses stood from their seats. They walked around the table and stopped in front of Elias. Princess Velrana was the first to bow her head. "By the honor of the Xalith Dominion, I swear my loyalty to you, Elias Carter." Princess Kalira followed. "By the strength of the Zindar Empire, I swear my loyalty." Princess Solani took a deep breath, then lowered her head. "By the wisdom of the Etheri Confederacy, I swear my loyalty." Finally, Princess Yvessa, her violet eyes gleaming with amusement, placed a hand over her heart. "By the will of the Ulrus Syndicate, I swear my loyalty." Gasps filled the hall. The most powerful heirs in the galaxy, rulers of empires, commanders of fleets, had just sworn fealty to a human. Elias nodded. "Then let's get to work." The aftermath of the game. The moment the challenge ended, news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A human had won. Not just any human, Elias Carter, a man who had once been an outcast in the consortium. Now, he was a legend. Some worlds celebrated. On Earth, people cheered in the streets. They had always been seen as the underdogs of the galaxy, the race that was too young to be taken seriously. But now they had a leader who had beaten the best. Other worlds, however, were furious. Rival factions within the consortium whispered in secret meetings, calling Elias a threat to the balance of power. There was already talk of assassinations. Elias knew he had made powerful enemies. But he also knew something else. He was not alone. A dangerous meeting. 2 days after the game, Elias stood on the bridge of a massive warship. The Eclipse, one of the most advanced ships in the consortium. It belonged to the Zindar Empire, but now it belonged to him. Behind him, the four princesses stood, watching the holographic map display a meeting place. "We have a problem," Princess Velrana said. "No surprise there," Elias replied. "What is it?" Princess Solani waved her hand, and the hologram zoomed in on a system near the outer rim. A fleet had gathered there, one that did not belong to any of the princesses. "The grand houses of the consortium do not accept our wager," Velrana explained. "They are calling a secret council to discuss your fate." Princess Kalira crossed her arms. "And when politicians discuss something in secret, it usually means one thing. They want to get rid of you." Elias exhaled, rubbing his temple. "So they don't want to honor the bet." "Figures." Princess Yvessa smirked. "Oh, some of them do. Others see an opportunity. And some just want you dead." Elias studied the fleet on the hologram. It was massive. Hundreds of warships. If they decided to move against him, he wouldn't stand a chance. Unless... He turned to the princesses. "How many ships do we control?" Princess Kalira grinned. "Enough to make them think twice." Elias nodded. "Then let's pay them a visit." The man who changed everything. As the Eclipse moved through hyperspace toward the secret meeting, Elias Carter stood in silence, staring at the stars. 2 weeks ago, he had been nothing. A minor human captain, barely respected, barely acknowledged. Now, he was the most dangerous man in the galaxy. He had the loyalty of 4 of the most powerful heirs in the consortium. He had their fleets, their armies, their influence. And soon, he would stand before the grand houses, the rulers of the entire galaxy. Would they accept him? Or would they try to destroy him? Either way, Elias knew one thing. He had already won once. And if he had to do it again, he would. The Eclipse exited hyperspace, emerging near the shadow of a colossal space station, the Grand Chamber, the heart of the consortium's political power. It was an ancient construct, orbiting a dying star, and it had witnessed countless rulers rise and fall over the millennia. Elias Carter stood on the bridge, arms crossed, staring at the massive station ahead. The station was surrounded by hundreds of warships, battle cruisers, dreadnoughts, carriers, all belonging to the grand houses, the most powerful ruling factions in the galaxy. Princess Velrana, standing beside him, watched the display with a grim expression. "They are showing their strength," she said. "They are trying to intimidate me," Elias corrected. "It won't work." Princess Kalira smirked. "Let's hope you're right. Because once we enter, there's no turning back." Elias nodded. He knew what was at stake. The grand houses had called this meeting not to honor his victory, but to judge him. If they saw him as a threat, they would crush him before he could solidify his power. But Elias had not come alone. He had brought 4 imperial princesses, and with them, the weight of their empires. It was time to face the rulers of the galaxy. Entering the lion's den. Aboard a royal transport, Elias and the 4 princesses descended into the grand chamber. The station's halls were enormous, lined with towering statues of past rulers and glowing banners of the grand houses. Every step Elias took echoed, as if the very walls were watching him. The main chamber was a coliseum of power, filled with delegates, military commanders, and the heads of the greatest ruling families. They sat in floating platforms, suspended over a vast pit of swirling energy, the core of judgment. At the highest platform sat the High Council, the ultimate rulers of the consortium. Their leader, Chancellor Orlan Vake, was a 6-eyed, 3-armed elder of the Xervan dynasty, and he radiated authority. The moment Elias stepped forward, the room fell into a tense silence. Then the accusations began. The challenge. "You do not belong here, human." A deep voice boomed from one of the platforms. It belonged to Lord Trinius, leader of the powerful Draxian Legion. His crimson armor gleamed as he pointed a clawed finger at Elias. You have no noble blood, no history, no right to stand among us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Elias smiled slightly but remained silent. He had expected this. Another voice spoke. This time, it was Lady Xyret, a regal, blue-skinned noble of the Valar Dominion. "You manipulated a children's game to force the loyalty of our future rulers," she said coldly. "You think that makes you worthy of power." Elias finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "The game was your tradition. The wager was your choice. I simply played by your rules. And won." Some of the nobles shifted uncomfortably. The truth was undeniable. But another voice cut through the tension. Lord Sakaros, a hulking reptilian warlord, slammed his fist against his throne. "Enough of this," he growled. "There is only one law that truly matters: the law of power." He leaned forward, his scaled face twisted into a grin. "If this human wants a seat among us, let him prove he can hold it." A slow smile spread across Elias's face. "Name the challenge." A duel of wills. The chamber fell silent again. Chancellor Orlan Vake nodded slowly. "It is fair. The ancient law allows a newcomer to claim their place if they can best one of our own." Elias looked toward the princesses. "I'll fight in your name," Princess Kalira offered, cracking her knuckles. "No," Elias said. "This is my battle." A flicker of approval crossed Kalira's reptilian features, but she said nothing. Lord Sakaros stood from his throne. "Then you fight me." Elias's heartbeat steadied. He had fought before. He had survived battles on the edges of space. But this fight was different. It wasn't about winning a duel. It was about proving that humanity deserved a place in the consortium. And so, the arena was prepared. The fight begins. The duel took place in a zero-gravity combat ring, surrounded by holographic barriers that prevented outside interference. The moment Elias stepped inside, he felt the weightlessness take hold. Lord Sakaros floated across from him, massive and powerful, his four arms flexing in anticipation. A countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Fight. Sakaros lunged first, using his powerful tail to propel himself forward. His four arms moved like whips, striking in rapid succession. Elias dodged, twisting his body in midair. He wasn't stronger, but he was faster. He used the zero-gravity environment to his advantage, flipping behind Sakaros and striking at his back. But Sakaros was not so easily fooled. He spun, his tail lashing out. It caught Elias in the ribs, sending him tumbling. Pain shot through his body, but he didn't let it stop him. Think. Adapt. Outsmart. That was the only way to win. As Sakaros charged again, Elias waited until the last second, then grabbed a floating debris fragment and hurled it into the warlord's face. Sakaros roared in frustration, momentarily blinded. That was the opening Elias needed. He launched forward, using the warlord's own size against him. He wrapped his arms around Sakaros's thick throat in a chokehold and held on with everything he had. Sakaros thrashed, trying to break free. But Elias didn't let go. He tightened his grip, cutting off air, cutting off strength. Seconds passed. Then, with a final struggling breath, Sakaros tapped out. The duel was over. Elias Carter, ruler of the future. As Elias floated back to the platform, the chamber was silent. Then, slowly, Chancellor Orlan Vake stood. "The challenge has been met. The law has been honored." He looked down at Elias. "Elias Carter, you now hold a seat among us." A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. Some nobles looked furious, others looked intrigued. But the decision was final. Elias Carter had proven that he wasn't just a human. He was a leader, a strategist, a warrior. And now, he had a voice in shaping the future of the galaxy. Elias Carter had done the impossible. He had beaten Lord Sakaros in combat. He had forced the grand houses to acknowledge him. And now, he held a seat among the rulers of the galaxy. But victory did not bring peace. As he stood in the great chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the universe, he could feel the storm brewing beneath the surface. Not everyone was happy with his rise. Not everyone was willing to accept a human among them, and some were already planning his downfall. A dangerous invitation. Hours after the duel, Elias sat inside a grand chamber aboard the Eclipse. The massive warship had been gifted to him by Princess Kalira's empire, and it now served as his command center. The four princesses sat around a holographic table, their expressions serious. "The grand houses accepted you today," Velrana said, her silver eyes sharp. "But don't be fooled. Many of them still want you gone." Elias smirked. "That's no surprise." Princess Silani, always the diplomat, folded her hands. "They will not attack openly. Not yet. But they will test you." Kalira leaned forward. "And the first test is already here." She pressed a button on the holotable. A message appeared, a formal invitation from Lord Trinius, the leader of the Draxian Legion. "You have earned a place among us, Elias Carter. To honor your victory, I invite you to a private gathering on Draxia Prime. There we will discuss the future of the consortium." Elias frowned. "It's a trap." Yvessa grinned. "Of course it is, but you have to go anyway." Elias sighed, leaning back in his chair. He knew she was right. If he refused, he would look weak. If he went, he would be walking into enemy territory. But that was the price of power. "Prepare the ship," he said. "We're going to Draxia Prime." Arrival on Draxia Prime. Draxia Prime was a planet of towering citadels and burning skies. The world was ruled by warriors, and the strong were celebrated above all else. As the eclipse descended, Elias watched from the viewing deck. Thousands of armored soldiers marched below, their banners displaying the sigil of the Draxian Legion, a crimson dragon, wings spread wide. "Charming place," Elias muttered. Velrana stood beside him. "Draxians respect strength above all else. Show weakness, and they will tear you apart." The ship landed. As Elias stepped out with the princesses, they were greeted by Lord Trinius himself. The massive warlord stood in golden armor, his crimson cape flowing behind him. His yellow eyes gleamed with amusement as he looked Elias up and down. "So the human arrives," Trinius said, his deep voice filled with mock respect. "I was beginning to think you were afraid." Elias smiled. "Afraid? No, just wondering how many traps you set for me." Trinius chuckled. "Only a few." The warlord turned and gestured for them to follow. "Come, the feast is prepared. Let us see if you are worthy of the power you claim." The Feast of Knives. The grand hall of Draxia Prime was filled with warriors, nobles, and powerful leaders from across the galaxy. The air was thick with tension, and Elias could feel all eyes on him. The feast began with grand speeches, toasts to the consortium, and endless food and drink. But Elias knew this was more than a celebration. It was a test. And the first challenge came quickly. A towering Draxian general slammed a heavy goblet onto the table, standing up. "Elias Carter," he boomed, "you defeated Socorros in combat. Impressive, but strength alone does not make a ruler." Elias met his gaze, waiting. The general smirked. "I challenge you to the right of endurance." Murmurs spread through the hall. The right of endurance was an ancient Draxian trial, a test of willpower and resilience. Yvessa leaned in, whispering, "They want to break you. If you fail, they'll call you weak." Elias exhaled. He had no choice. He stood. "I accept." The hall erupted in cheers. The trial had begun. The right of endurance. Elias was led into a circular arena, where a massive stone table was placed at the center. Across from him sat the Draxian general, a smirk on his face. A servant placed 2 black metal gauntlets in front of them. "These are pain gauntlets," the general said. "Each one contains microscopic energy spikes. The longer you wear them, the greater the pain. Elias picked one up. It was heavy, humming with power. The general grinned. We place our hands inside at the same time. The first to remove theirs loses. Elias nodded. This was a battle of will. A countdown began. 3, 2, 1. They slammed their hands inside. Instantly, a wave of searing pain shot through Elias's arm. It felt like fire, like blades piercing his flesh. But he gritted his teeth, refusing to show weakness. The general laughed. Not bad, human, but can you last? Seconds passed, then minutes. Sweat dripped down Elias's face, but he remained still. The pain grew worse, burning through his bones. The general clenched his jaw, his confidence fading. His fingers trembled. His breathing grew heavy. The hall watched in silence. Then, finally, the general let out a roar and yanked his hand free. Elias did not move. The room erupted in shock. He had won. He slowly removed his hand, his palm red and trembling, but he smiled. That was fun. Do you have another challenge, or are we done? Lord Trinius laughed, clapping his hands. Enough. The human has proven himself. The tension broke. The warriors of Draxia roared in approval. Elias Carter had passed their test. But even as the feast continued, he knew the real battle was still ahead. This was only the beginning. The war that looms. Late that night, back aboard the Eclipse, Elias sat in his chambers, studying the political situation. Velrana entered. You impressed them today. Elias nodded. But I know this isn't over. She sighed. No, it isn't. There are whispers in the shadows. Some of the grand houses are preparing for war. They fear what you represent. Elias clenched his fists. He had fought to earn his place. But now he had to fight to keep it. The storm was coming, and Elias Carter was ready. Elias Carter sat in the command center of the Eclipse, staring at the holographic star map in front of him. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. The grand houses were moving. Some were rallying behind him, but others were preparing for war. The message from Velrana had been clear. They fear you, and when rulers fear something, they try to destroy it. Elias exhaled. He had fought to earn a place in the consortium, but now he had to fight to keep it. He turned to the 4 princesses who stood around him. Each of them had placed their trust in him. Each of them had risked everything by supporting him. He would not let them down. A galaxy on the brink. The news spread quickly. The grand houses were splitting. Some saw Elias as a symbol of change, proof that the old ways could be challenged. Others saw him as a threat, a dangerous outsider who did not belong. And one of them had made the first move. Lord Trinius has declared you an enemy, Velrana reported. His fleet is mobilizing. Elias clenched his jaw. He had known this would happen. Trinius had never wanted him in the consortium. The warlord had only waited for an excuse to attack. But Elias had no intention of waiting for the enemy to strike first. We move before he does, Elias said. We take the fight to him. The princesses exchanged glances. Then Kalira grinned. Now you're thinking like a ruler. Elias turned to his crew. Prepare for battle. The Battle of Draxia Prime. The Eclipse and its fleet arrived over Draxia Prime, where Lord Trinius's forces were already gathering. The moment they exited hyperspace, alarms blared. Trinius's fleet was massive. Hundreds of warships, dreadnoughts, and carriers loomed in the darkness of space. But Elias was not afraid. He activated the comms. This is Elias Carter, he said. I do not wish for war, but I will not run from it. Stand down, and we can avoid bloodshed. Trinius's laughter echoed through the speakers. You are a fool, human. The consortium will never bow to an outsider. Elias sighed. I was hoping you'd say that. He cut the transmission. Then he gave the order. All ships, attack. The wrath of humanity. The battle erupted in an explosion of fire and steel. Starfighters clashed in the void. Capital ships exchanged heavy cannon fire, and the darkness of space lit up with destruction. Elias was at the center of it all, directing his fleet with precision. Enemy dreadnought at our flank. Kalira called. Redirect our bombers. Take it out, Elias ordered. The Eclipse shook as enemy fire struck its shields. Velrana reported, shields at 70%, holding strong. Elias narrowed his eyes. Where's Trinius? Silani pointed at the holomap. His flagship is moving toward us. Elias smirked. Good. Bring us to him. The Eclipse pushed forward, cutting through enemy fire. The battle raged around them. But Elias had one goal, to face Trinius himself. The final duel. As the Eclipse docked with Trinius's flagship, Elias and Kalira stepped onto the enemy ship. The halls were filled with battle-ready Draxian warriors, but Elias did not slow down. He had come for one man. In the throne room of the flagship, Lord Trinius stood waiting. His crimson armor gleamed, and his golden eyes burned with fury. You should have stayed in your place, human, Trinius growled. Elias drew his weapon, a plasma-forged blade gifted to him by Velrana. My place is wherever I decided to be. Trinius roared and charged. The two warriors clashed. Trinius was strong, his attacks heavy and brutal. But Elias was faster, smarter. He dodged, countered, and struck with precision. The battle was fierce, but Elias had one advantage. He had fought against impossible odds before. With a final strike, Elias drove his blade through Trinius's armor. The warlord gasped, falling to his knees. The battle was over. Elias stepped back, breathing heavily. He looked down at his fallen enemy and said, "This is the future. Accept it or be left behind." Trinius stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "I yield," he said. And with that, Elias Carter had won. A new era begins. The news of Elias's victory spread across the galaxy. The grand houses saw what had happened, and they understood. The human was no longer an outsider. He was a force to be reckoned with. A meeting was called in the Grand Chamber, where Elias stood before the rulers of the consortium. This time, there were no challenges, no doubts. Chancellor Orlan Vake spoke first. "You have done what none before you have. You have forced the galaxy to change." He paused, then nodded. "The consortium stands with you." A cheer erupted through the chamber. Elias Carter was no longer just a human. He was a leader, a ruler, a legend. And as he looked at the stars, he knew this was only the beginning.